Cool.
All right, welcome everyone. It's awesome to be here with you again, this time in Sydney. This is our third presentation. So this presentation has gone through to a world tour. We started it in Barcelona in Europe. Back then it was Bruno Morel from Internet and myself. Then we did the same presentation in Boston. When we were in Boston, we were comparing prices between OpenStack and Amazon AWS in North America, in the United States. And now that we are here in APAC, we are comparing prices with Amazon AWS in Sydney. So that should give you the full spectrum of the comparison now, and it's probably a good way for us to conclude this series of presentations. So my name is Bruno Lago. I work for the Catalyst Cloud in New Zealand. We are a public cloud provider in New Zealand with 3 cloud regions. Prices comparable to global cloud providers, but based there in the corner of the world. So when you see those OpenStack presentations, there was a tiny dot on that little corner. That was us. Now there are 3 dots because of our 3 cloud regions over there. And presenting with me today, we have Jean from OVH. Jean, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Jean-Daniel Bonnetot. I work for OVH as product marketing. And OVH is a public cloud provider. We are from France, and we have data center all around the world. And yeah, I will try to give you more information on the public cloud case in particular.
And finally, we also have Rico.
Yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Rico. So I work at EasyStack, and what we do is that we are a private cloud provider, and we have a lot of customers in APAC. So that's why I get to have the honor to talk with these guys who we share a little bit in APAC, and also we do a lot of private clouds and anything related to the private clouds and private hosted cloud, those things. So yeah, that's I hope we can learn from each other in the following presentations.
So something that we're also trying to do this time is to represent the 3 most common use cases in OpenStack, which is myself representing you running a private cloud entirely done by you, right? You're getting code from openstack.org and you're deploying it yourself. Rico will be representing a managed private cloud scenario, and Jean will be representing a public cloud scenario. So again, you get to ask questions about these 3 scenarios and understand a bit more how each one works. So let's get started. I just want to mention something first. When it comes to comparing cloud offerings, you really have to take location in consideration, and this is because the cost structures are quite different in North America, in Europe, and in APAC. So the hardware costs tend to be cheaper in certain regions when it comes to power, colocation space, or having your own data center. And also the cost for staff, the cost for people varies quite a lot. So
I think we start so you might heard a little bit about in the previous summit about the AWS price with Europe or with the US. Of course, we update those data as well. But this time that I'm here, I want to talk about the AWS price difference cost globally. I mean in APAC. So if you see the slide, this is comparisons between original US price, and if you see the price of AWS in certain use cases, it will be 8% more of your price cost. And you move to the APAC, that will turn you 29% more. So that is one of very interesting observe. You see, the AWS price actually jam more and more in APAC because there's, they have to have a human there, they have to have manager there, they have their resource located at APAC. Also, the network layer is more expensive than, of course, compared to the US. And so that actually make the APAC a very good competitor to adopt some technology like open source, like OpenStack. So that's why OpenStack natively become a very good competitor in the when you talk about China, and you talk about Singapore, there's a lot of cloud that in NTT, a lot of OpenStack cloud there. So that might be one of the reasons that the OpenStack cloud get to rise. Also, in APAC, there is not like in US, a lot of new growing business and now there's a lot of a customer requires about require EasyStack they want to have their own cloud solutions, but you see they have a marketing growing, but they not have their infrastructure, cloud infrastructure there yet. A lot of them do this. So in these terms, they're actually very interesting point that a lot of customers, they need public cloud like AWS or other public cloud at the very first point. Because if you're talking about the cloud management resources, we have a lot of software engineer there, but it's we're talking about the overall control. You have to have a trust provider or you have to manage by your own. That means that when your business grows that in APAC, that you need to have some other way to help you to manage what you have to. You have to manage those applications at some place of cloud. So might be the public cloud first. And now that we also have help to doing the private hosted private cloud. That is from turn that customers also do private cloud at the end. But at the very first point, they will start with OpenStack already. I mean, they might be adopt public cloud, but also private cloud. And the reason of that is, for example, in China, we are growing business, right? We new, and we have a lot of chances to say, oh, we want open source. So the government support open source. This kind of policy that you have to use in open source, not something that already well adopted in the global. So you need to using open source. You have to must recommend to you to have your own private cloud. And turns out OpenStack is kind of oh wow, the only superstar there. So yeah, that's very I would say that's some of the observed point of the APAC area for you to know. And back to Bruno.
So when we're doing this comparison, there are two things that we do here. Number one is we'll show you a total cost of ownership model for running an OpenStack private cloud, right? When you have a proposal to do a private cloud in your organization, part of that success is not only a successful technical project and having an excellent cloud system running for your organization, there's also a business story that goes side by side. And we saw a lot of presentations covering the technical aspect, but not necessarily covering what is the financial story behind OpenStack. And this is what we're trying to do here. So together with this presentation, you are getting a spreadsheet. In the end, you will find a QR code where you can download that spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet gives you a total cost of ownership model for an OpenStack private cloud. You can tweak it. You can see the assumptions we have there and work it out to find out what the total cost of ownership would be for you. So, Gian, could you just bring the TCO spreadsheet a little bit?
Yeah, I'll try.
So I can show a few things.
Yep. Come.
Right. So just want to explain to you briefly how that's done. I'll probably take compute as an example. So what you have in there, I'll start from the bottom. Maybe it's a bit small. Do you know how to zoom in? Perfect, thank you. So we are providing you with a bill of materials for all the hardware that we have considered. You find specific parts in there and what prices we have considered for those parts. Then you will find other inputs that were built based on your assumptions and other variables you have. How much do you pay for your rack space? How much do you pay for power? And so on. And eventually, we'll show you how that calculation is done so that you can get to the point where you know your price for a vCPU per month, per hour, the price for RAM, the price for storage, and so on, right? And we try to do this in the open so that you can understand the rationale in our comparison there. Thank you. So when I'm talking about the private cloud scenario in this presentation, it is really important for you to consider that I'm trying to show you what the bottom line of having a reasonably large private cloud looks like in terms of costs. So we're talking about a private cloud that would have 86,000 vCPUs, about 226 terabytes of RAM, almost a petabyte of block storage, and a bit more than a petabyte of object storage. So that gives you a reference for the size. And these are some of the assumptions we've made that you may want to tweak. But I'm assuming in this case that you're a reasonably large organization, that this is a cloud that needs to run 24/7, and that you have 6 full-time employees working to keep that cloud running and delivering the service levels that you want. So another important thing is just to show you that the cost is actually valid from a cost recovery point of view. So in this graph, you can see that on the left side, the left bar is your total cost of ownership in 3 years, right? And again, it's a very large cloud, so it's about $12 million in this case. But by selling internally, doing a chargeback mechanism internally where you're charging the vCPU, the RAM, the disk, the amount that we're proposing, you can see that you can recover that cost over time. And in the TCO, there is a variable where you say, this is my margin, and am I trying to make a profit here, or am I just trying to recover my costs, right? And this is more or less the cost breakdown for that model, where hardware is a large chunk of your costs, then you have staff coming second, then power and rack space. Now, Rico highlighted something really important to me. He was saying, for staff, I have considered the salary cost of an OpenStack engineer in the United States or in Australia as a reference. But Rico was also pointing out to me that in APAC, sometimes you can get that cost reduced quite substantially, right? So it would be interesting to look at that model when managed in other regions. And this is something new I have added for your reference. So what I did is I took the latest prices from AWS in Sydney. I'm looking at their compute instances and the M4 series of the memory optimized compute instances. And you have their flavors on the bottom. For simplicity, I have CPU and RAM there. So you can see 2 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM. The blue bar is your private cloud cost. The yellow bar is AWS with their maximum discount. And by maximum discount, I mean you are reserving that instance for 3 years, and you're paying for it up front, right? And then the red bar is the on-demand price from AWS. So this is really important because sometimes people ask, why are people deploying private clouds? Why banks, why telcos, why large organizations are deploying private clouds? And the answer is because there is a massive financial benefit for them to do so. Right? So I'm not surprised when I see people that started on the public cloud because the risk is low, they can get out really quick and validate their business model, growing to very successful business like Dropbox, for example, and eventually reaching a point where they realize, I need to do my own thing, right?
So after the private cloud use case, we will focus a little bit on the public cloud use case.
So sorry.
Here you have the AWS Simple Monthly Calculator. It's an online tool which helps you to have the right idea of the final price for a complete use case at the end of the month. So you have on the right side different use cases, and you can see how much it will cost at the end of the month. So basically what we did is we took some of them and we took the price of AWS, and we simulated it also on OVH public cloud to have the OpenStack-based public cloud point of view. And we do the same on the private cloud based on OpenStack at Catalyze. We also add 2 other use cases which are not here, but they are also interesting, so we will see it later. As you can imagine, I'm sure you already did it, trying to compare an instance at one provider, at a provider A, and another instance at a provider B, and trying to find the perfect match between the 2 providers. It's like comparing apple and oranges. It's really difficult. You never had the same hardware, you never had the same frequency on the CPU, and all the capacity are different, so it's really difficult. And there is also the business model, which is involved in this comparison. So what we did basically is we removed all the complexity. We removed the spot instances, the large instances, the reserved instances. We only took the on-demand hourly build instances to make the comparison, make it as simple as possible. As you probably know, also at AWS, there is a lot of different instance type. You have different generations. You have different type of instance. Some of them are for the computation, CPU-oriented. Some of them are for RAM and storage. And all of those instance type are different declination in terms of size. So you start from small to go to the 8x large. So when you multiply the generation by the instance type and by the size, you have a huge catalog. And at OVH, it's almost the same. We have also different generation. We have also different instance type and size, of course. Our catalog is smaller, but we also have many instance types. So to have the perfect match, even with all those instance types, it's not possible to have the perfect match. So we had to find a solution to make it fair. So we defined a kind of rule with a priority, as you can see. The first one is the CPU, because most of the time it's the most important part. Then comes the RAM and the storage at the end, because if there is a missing part on the storage, you can always complete by Cinder volume if you need it.
There is an important point that I would like to make about this. Any time where we couldn't find a flavor on OVH, for example, that would match the AWS flavor, we have given that advantage to AWS. So what we've done is we picked the largest flavor on the OVH cloud, right?
And it gives the advantage to AWS in terms of price.
Yeah. So we're trying as much as possible to make the comparison fair, and when someone is in disadvantage, we'll put us in disadvantage.
So we're trying to make sure that everything compared with AWS price is like fair to them. So there's also 2 points that we have to making out like services and guarantees. The services is about, so in new AWS already have a lot of services there. And we're trying to make sure that we compare with them the right way. So instead of like we just compare those services, those services is not exist in OpenStack. So what we do is that we give we compensate it with the like a system admin price. We add the system admin price or manager's price, like those resources you needed to maintain those services in the OpenStack price. So in this way that you will make sure that we compare them with the right way, with a fair way to them. And also the guarantee. So we have a lot of slides showing you how the price is going, like public cloud, private cloud. And you must aware that the risk in the public cloud is somehow lower, because the public clouds help you to absorb those like manager risk or those the available of the services. They help you to absorb those risk to themselves. So just to head up that there is a guarantee and the services the issue that you have to aware about, and that's what. So move to the.
I'll give you one example of what Rico was talking about. Let's say if you're using AWS, you're using Elastic Cache, Memcache, or Elasticsearch as a service. If you don't find that service in OpenStack land, we would add some sysadmin time, a few hours there of managing that service every month in the comparison. You guys can see when that assumption was made in the spreadsheets that go together with this presentation, right? So there are a few scenarios where we had to introduce that. And finally, this is just a brief one. I just want to show you that before we go into the application scenarios where you have all the components together, I just want to show you the comparison of prices for compute storage on these providers. So you can see the memory optimized instances, the compute optimized instances, then object storage on the 3 scenarios, and then block storage. For block storage, this is the SSD storage tier that we are considering here in the comparison. So that gives you an idea of, a gigabyte here and a gigabyte there, what cost should I expect. Now here's the fun part.
So yeah, we start to do the comparison. So here's our first model, the web applications. And I'm a software engineer as well, so when it's time that I had to build a real production, this somehow is just look like this. So we have a load balancer on top of our services. I mean, we have a 3 API server, we have a 2 application server. Those application server has 150 object storage. Block storage. Object storage. Sorry. And we have one of the larger flavor for NoSQL database. One of them is for relational database, and there's 30 of the 30 gigabytes of the object storage, and there's output, like we estimate the output will be like something 120 gigabytes. I mean the bandwidth output. And you see, with this comparison, you see the monthly cost of the AWS is about 965, and the OVH is, I would say, much lower. Is a public cloud compared to public cloud OVH has, it has 750, and with a private cloud there is around 260. So there is a gap there. Again, you have to aware that you're doing a private cloud. You have to know what you're doing, and that is the price that you can reference on. So we went into the price. So why make the AWS kind of more? Because the compute resource is kind of more expensive. When you're trying to have like larger template, if you see on the price of the AWS, they grow up more because you hold their resource there and at the point that they cannot use it in other ways. So the larger your flavor, possibly the larger the price is. There's one, and you're aware that there is also API requests and bandwidth, which you see in the OVH one. There's actually usually those free. And it's like, so you don't have to much care, but if you're in AWS, you have aware of less such a spending. Also, we talk about adding the DevOps time there. So maybe you're using the AWS with the services. If you want in OVH, we give you a DevOps time, which will make sure that there is you have plenty like manager of the codes that is at the right point, like only 21%, but you see the AWS is much longer. And comparing the price with, again, we compare with US, Europe, and the APAC. You will see the price is just growing as the slide that we show at the very first. You see the US price is compared with EU price is like 11 more, but you see the OVH price is average like lower, and the EU price even lower. They have a lot of great infrastructure there to make sure that you get the best part of the entire bargain. And the APAC part that you see the AWS price is growing much more like huger. So this is a web application cases. So if you're using web applications, this is the number you're going to find out. And so you have a lot of web applications. Now you might have also mobile applications. You have a server to take care about the mobile need required, and that is like an infrastructure like this. So you need probably like 2 load balancer and 3 APIs server, and also you need to like 2 NoSQL database and 2 relational database, and 3 TBs of object storage, and 1 TBs of bandwidth. And the bandwidth is much more like larger. You're doing is a mobile application. You have to respond to the mobile, otherwise you're not. And in this case, that the AWS price It's like 2,200 or something. Yeah, it went out more. We'll give you some detail there. And the average price is like growing a little, like to 1,500. And the private cloud, again, of course, is much lower. It's like 500. But you have just aware that the first two they are the public cloud. They are as equal as public cloud. And you see that this time that we compare, of course, the cost of the compute is still a large amount of the cost. And you see the bandwidth is actually expand. So you have to be aware of the bandwidth when you're trying to put your mobile applications in some kind of public cloud, like maybe like AWS, to they have this kind of cost that you have to write. And also API requires, if you see it actually expand a little. Like it's again, a bandwidth is much more important if you didn't aware of it, but it's at some point at the end, at monthly you receive the bill, you'll be surprised. Like maybe for example, if you're doing like a CI/CD, wow, good luck with you. And also, we have like a little like bandwidth in the OVH, and it's also 21% of the DevOps time. And yeah, that's the amount that we compare. And yeah, back to the price. That the US price is yearly is like to 25,000. Then and the compare with the OVH one is you see we compare with the yearly, so it's like the gap is getting bigger. And the EU, the Europe one, you see the gap over there that you live in the Europe, and there's 1% more cost in the AWS. There's 12% less in the OVH one. But if you move to APAC, well, there's some kind of money that you will consider to use. Again, there's like the APAC guys still have a lot of AWS adoption, but it's like you have to choose at the end when your business is growing that do you want to keep doing it or do you have other plans? Yeah, we're back to Daniel.
Just, I wanted to add something just here. At OVH, we do not build the bandwidth for outgoing traffic from the server. So the small bandwidth split here we have on the bill is for the outgoing traffic for object storage. That's just underline that when you take a full scenario, you have to see the whole part, the whole subject, and put it at the run it for a full month to have the good idea of the final price. As you can see here, the bandwidth will be on AWS will be really important. For OVH, it's just 2%. It comes from the object storage, so there is some hidden cost. Not really hidden, but you have to identify it if you want to have the final idea of the price. So let's go for the deep learning use case. It's a good occasion for us because we just integrated the GPU in our public cloud offer. So the GPU instances we will compare in Amazon, in AWS is the G3 4x large instance, which integrates a Tesla M60. On OVH, we integrate GeForce 1080 Ti. And if you look at the benchmarks, it's almost the same. So we have here a fair comparison. So in that use case, it's a use case for a startup which provides a service to analyze medical picture for doctors. So on the left side, you have two small servers for administration and transfer stuffs. And the deep learning part is divided on two parts. The first one is the inference phase, which is load balanced on 4 instances, GPU instances, and the training phase is load balanced on 9 instances. The incoming traffic is really important. It's something like 10 terabytes. It's stored on the object storage, which works like a cache. Then the GPU instance take the data to the GPU instance and compute on it. As you can see, the price here, OVH is cheaper than AWS, something like 24%. And if on the previous use cases there were some hidden costs, mainly on AWS, here OVH and AWS, you will pay for what you want. That means the computation in that case. Deep learning is mainly about computation. You don't want to pay for storage or for bandwidth or anything else. So here you will pay something like 100% for the computation. It's a good news. The last use case is about archive. And at Catalyze, you launch your product also based on Swift for archive?
No, not on the Catalyst public cloud. What I did here, just to clarify, I did some calculations for a private cloud scenario where you have acquired one of those servers, maybe from Supermicro, that will have 60 3.5-inch disk base, and you have fully populated that server with 8 terabyte drives, and you have a lot of them. I've learned quite a lot doing this scenario. I also would like to ask if you guys want to collaborate in producing the TCO model for this scenario. Talk to me, because as you can see, I was really surprised when I did the modeling for that one, and the cost for the private cloud was actually higher than the cost for the public cloud, right? And I was wondering, well, there's no margin here, so where's that cost coming from? One of the things to keep in mind is that I have fully depreciated hardware. There is an assumption there where your hardware is being depreciated over 3 years. And one of the things that I have learned is that probably people are depreciating their archival type of hardware over a longer period. So I definitely would like to go back and revisit this later, but not in time for this presentation.
Yeah. So about the service is based on Swift on your side too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Swift.
Swift, so you have the Swift API, you can push your data. On our side, for VH, we also have a gateway in front of Swift to provide SSH protocol based, like SCP, SFTP, or Rsync, so you can interact with the archive system with those protocols. And it works like AWS Glacier. You can push your data, and to get back your data, you have to work them up with a simple call. Wait a little bit, and then you are able to download your data. So here we have a system which generates 500 gigabytes per month. And for legal reason, we need to store it. So the archive system is a really good solution for that. On 10 years, it represents something like 60 terabytes. And we have 50 gigabytes as outgoing traffic for log analysis or something like that. So here the difference of the price between AWS and OVH is something like 40%.
Isn't that amazing? Seriously.
Crazy.
Like, we all know that Glacier prices are very, very low, but I do take my hat off for what you guys are doing at OVH, and
Thank you.
It's pretty impressive. Congratulations.
And as in the previous scenario here, you can see that there is no hidden cost. We don't see the, oh yeah, see. 97% of the split is for the storage, and you don't want to pay for the bandwidth in that case, and you won't. What I wanted to highlight here is this is the situation after 10 years. So you have the 60 terabytes stored in the archive system. So that's why this is a huge part of your bill. If you take this situation for the first year, of course, the bandwidth will have a higher impact on your split. And the last slide for those use cases. Again, we can see that the price for the European region for AWS is more expensive than in the US, and in APAC, it's 22% more expensive too. For OVH, we are 1% more expensive in Europe. And that's it.
Cool. And I think time to wrap it up and conclude. One of the things that we always have to discuss when you are assessing your plan for your cloud needs is whether you're going with a private cloud, a managed private cloud, or a public cloud, right? And the idea with this graph here is just to show you the balance between cost and risk for this scenario. So if you're doing a private cloud, you at a certain scale, right? Let's be clear. If you have a handful of virtual machines and you're doing a private cloud, I'm sorry, it will cost a fortune. But at a certain scale, the private cloud can be substantially cheaper than public cloud currently. But the risk of that project is higher on your side because now you need to have knowledge about the private cloud solution you're using, potentially employ people and retain these people, keep them engaged so that you can maintain good service levels. And if you don't know what you're doing, there's a chance that your project will fail, right? Whereas with a managed private cloud, maybe the cost will go a bit higher depending on the region you are. Maybe in APAC, it could even go a bit lower. But the risk is somehow mitigated by the fact that you have someone really experienced in OpenStack guiding you and taking care of your cloud on your behalf. And finally, with the public cloud, the costs are higher, but the risk is very low, and the entry barrier is also very low. So it's a common pattern. We see people starting with public cloud and then slowly moving back to a private cloud as they reach a certain scale. Now, in case you have questions and comments, please reach out. You have our contacts, our emails there. And finally, we are trying to give you all the information that we have used to do this price comparisons, including the TCO model for the private cloud. If you go to this URL, if you scan this QR code, and later on when the foundation publishes this presentation on YouTube, we'll try to get the URL in there as well. You will have access to the source. You can change, make it yours. And if possible, send some feedback to us. If you find something that needs to be adjusted, that you don't agree, let's have that discussion and try to improve that model. With that said, thank you very much for attending our session. And if you have questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
When you do the cost comparison, have you taken the human resources cost into consideration?
So, yes. So the question was, when doing the cost comparison, the TCO model for the private cloud, have we taken in consideration the cost for people? Certainly, right? So as I said, we've made an assumption of what that cost of employing a person is. There's another assumption in there, which is what is the overhead of having that employee in your company? So I think it's 40%. So it's salary plus the 40% overhead to pay for admin staff, office costs, and so on. And when we had that graph outlining the TCO breakdown, you saw that hardware was the biggest cost, followed by staff, right? And depending on the region you are, it could be that staff will be more expensive and hardware will be a bit cheaper. So,
what you included in your TCO was the salary from New Zealand?
No, it was, so what I did was I went to one of those salary comparison tools, and I look at the cost of a highly qualified infrastructure developer engineer in the United States and use that as a reference, right? I have also seen some research about OpenStack engineers, so I try to go with a reasonable salary there. You guys can go and have a look, maybe increase the salary, so when you do your internal business case. Yeah.
You had 6 full-time equivalents for that, right?
Yes.
From your experience, do you think there's actually a reduction in having 6 full-time equivalents to manage that instead of AWS, or is it relatively the same?
So if I understood the question correctly, he's asking we had 6 full-time employees for the private cloud scenario to manage the private cloud 24/7. And the question is,
If you use Amazon, you still need some type of infrastructure manager to manage all, to manage the.
that's absolutely correct. Yes.
How many would you say would, I'm trying to, what is the personnel reduction of
Yep.
a large corporation to go to AWS?
Yeah. So it is an interesting question. The question is, if you're running on AWS as a public cloud, you also need infrastructure engineers or people managing your public cloud infrastructure. So what is the reduction that you should see when you move to a private cloud and vice versa? So it is a hard question, right? Because it really depends on how you're approaching this as an organization. To be honest, I don't think even with a large private cloud, I don't think you need 6 full-time employees to manage that large private cloud. So we've seen in one of the keynotes, I think it was the team at Adobe managing a cloud that is even larger than the one that I have used as an example, and I think they had 4 people, right? The reason I had 6 full-time employees is because if you're trying to manage a 24/7 service with a roster, with an on-call roster, that's probably what you end up with. That doesn't mean that these guys are full-time, tweaking, managing your cloud. Now, when you're managing infrastructure on AWS or any of the public cloud providers, you have a valid point there. We never took in consideration in this comparison the actual cost of the salaries of the people that are managing the infrastructure. To be honest, when we're comparing AWS with other OpenStack public clouds, you could potentially assume that it's about the same amount of people, except when we have some additional DevOps time to compensate for a service that doesn't exist in OpenStack yet. That being said, we're increasing the number of services in OpenStack, and that's reducing the DevOps overhead.
In fact, in every situation, you need an engineer to manage your application. It's true for the public cloud use case, it's true for AWS, of course, and it's true for private cloud also. What you have more on the private cloud side is the engineer to manage the infrastructure.
Yeah.
And this is the additional part, in fact.
Yeah. And I would suggest that if you're doing a private cloud, probably the minimum you would need is 2 people. And the reason I say 2 people is because if someone is hit by a bus, you want to make sure that you can still run your cloud. So 2 or 3 people is probably the minimum you would need to run. Yeah. And so I imagine that if you're running on a public cloud, you would also have 2 or 3 people. Yeah.
So like one of the cases that you can see, the Yahoo Japan, you see there's a very big use cases, but they manage their own entire cloud, like just I remember it's like just like 4 person there, just to manage such a big private cloud.
It's really impressive, the economies of scale that you have when you have software-defined infrastructure like OpenStack, right? The other thing is, that's a call for you, Rico, with the managed private cloud scenario. If you're doing a private cloud yourself, you're employing this team of people yourself, and you need to keep 6 people around. But if you go to a company like EasyStack or Catalyst and you say, please manage my private cloud on my behalf, we'll probably use our existing pool of engineers who are already 24/7 to manage your private cloud. And that means effectively we might be using half a person in terms of effort to manage your private cloud remotely. So if you're starting a private cloud, it may be a good idea to start with a managed private cloud provider and then move to owning that private cloud once you have the scale. More questions? You will have to yell.
Yes, one more.
Very far
There.
back.
Bruno.
We don't have a comparison of Google Cloud. If you would like to see a comparison of Google Cloud, I would like to invite you to join us and potentially add. Look, it takes a lot of time to do these comparisons, right? It takes a lot of time. And let's be honest, yes, I know that there are price differences, but I think it gives you a ballpark estimate of how that compares to the global scale, massive public cloud providers. But you're welcome to join and do the Google Cloud. There was a question here, over there.
It was just a similar question. I was wondering whether you looked at VMware as well, because in my mind, sort of, VMware managed looking after your cloud as a VM would be similar to an OpenStack.
So the question is whether we have looked at VMware. So when you say VMware, are you talking about a private cloud scenario where you're using VMware as a hypervisor in the VMware toolset? No, we have not. Well, not in this comparison, right? The only thing that I can share with you is that when we were doing our, initially a private cloud in New Zealand, which eventually became the Catalyst public cloud, we have certainly looked at the comparison of OpenStack with VMware to do that analysis. And because of the cost of licensing with VMware, the cost for VMware was substantially higher than doing it with OpenStack. And to the point where we knew that eventually, prices for public cloud will keep on going down and will be knocked out of the market because of the licensing overhead that we would have with VMware. So, end of the day, if you are in the public cloud space and not using open source software, good luck. It's either software written yourself or open source software. Otherwise, it's really hard to compete in price with other people. You can, but could you come a bit closer? Like, this is such a big room.
Yeah. So I missed the start, but are you using an OpenStack distribution, or are you using sort of your own?
Fantastic question. So the question is, for the private cloud scenario, are you using an OpenStack distribution or are you using your own? So I have assumed that you're taking OpenStack code from OpenStack.org and that you're using one of the community projects, the OpenStack Ansible, Kola, or so on, to deploy and manage OpenStack. And the reason I say so is, the reason I have used that scenario is because personally I talk a lot to people in the community, and I have found lots of successful deployments done this way, and even a lot of the, well, anyway, we can talk offline about this in detail, but OpenStack code from OpenStack.org, no specific vendor, no specific distribution, right?
So then you need to do all your own support.
You need to do what? Your own support. Yes, to some extent. Yes,
So, yeah,
you need to do your own support, and that's why you have people in the private cloud scenario. But then if you're going to a managed private cloud, the managed private cloud provider is doing that support for you, right? So we're showing you that scale there.
But to add on to that question, you show the risk is high on the private cloud, right?
Yes, the risk is high on the private cloud.
Risk, you still have to invest something to mitigate that risk, especially when you are supporting even kind of applications for your supporting a business.
Certainly.
Where do you consider those costs?
So the question is, I was showing that the risk is higher for the private cloud scenario, and when you have a risk that is higher, you need to do something to mitigate that risk. So where am I compensating for that cost? Where am I covering that cost? And the answer is in building a team with 6 engineers that are highly qualified and know what they are doing with OpenStack. That's how we're mitigating that risk, right? So the important part is the private cloud can give you a substantial financial advantage, but that comes with a risk. And the question is, what is your risk appetite? Because end of the day, if you go for a bit more risk, you can have a higher benefit, right? So it's your call. Where is your organization placed on that spectrum of risk?
Yeah. But again, the risk is like you keep managing your private clouds, or you have like a private cloud provider to help you with that. But from time that the time is growing, the person you hire to charge your private cloud actually get more experience, and with experience that actually like reduce your risk. Like I won't say like totally, but you will get a very good teams that have a lot of experience with your environment doing it, so the risk will drop down.
And I'm sorry we're running out of time now, so thank you for your questions. If you have more questions, we'll stay around for some time. Please come and have a chat with us. Thank you once again.
Thank you.